and I'll make sure that Holly gets the recording. So I think, and Elon has to leave early today, and we are here in the very capable hands of Rabbi Julia Appel and Rabbi Brad Hirschfield. So thank you both. But we want to go ahead and get started. As you can see, we have a few additional people on our call today, which is really quite wonderful. And before we get started, I wanted to connect a few dots, because we have been working with our foundations and funders in very much a theoretical capacity. And today we get to connect the dots between theory and practice. And see, back in November, did we start Spark in November, December, November? I don't know. As you all know, that all the days blend together. The days
November. It was November.
After Yom Kippur, they just blurs.
Right, right. Sort of, like it was cold-ish, and now it's just colder. I don't know, or not so cold. Anyway, when we began this process, as you know, we began with Every Voice Counts, and really taking a deep dive into who we are in our community and what we represent. And our Spark teams were formed with 10 teams, just so our funders know. We have 10 active working Spark teams, which is really incredible, and they've all been doing such a good job. And it's not an easy lift. It's a heavy lift. Everybody's been working really hard, and I just wanted to acknowledge that in the midst of everything else that's going on in our world, a pandemic and all of the other challenges that come along with it, we're still tackling what our Jewish future looks like. And while our institutions are working kind of independently at the moment, it really is a collaborative effort of our institutions picking different areas to focus on, so that we can all come back together and really figure out who we want to be as a community over the next 3, 5, 10, 15 years. And it's such a wonderful example of how we can actually all function together in our own spaces for a greater good. And our funders is such an important part of this too, because we've had our own process at the same time that we started back in May, originally in meeting with the JCC, but really morphing into an exploration of who do we want to be together as funders, and how can we then help move our community forward in partnership with all the organizations and the work. So this meeting today is so exciting, because it's a pulling together of all of those various pieces, and it's the beginning of figuring out together what this looks like without any real preconceived notions, ideas, or outcomes, other than we all want to see our community be as strong and successful as it can possibly be, which means that we have an active, engaged community in which people feel good about the Jewish community and the work that we're doing. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Elon, and I want to thank Klal again, Elon, Brad, Julia, for all of their hard work. Amy Liebenson, who's not on the call, who's been staffing this for us, who's done an extraordinary job, and obviously the Konar Foundation, who has funded this. This is an incredibly wonderful, unique, extraordinary opportunity that we have just all really enjoyed and feel very grateful to have everybody working together on. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's good to be together with all of you and to have a growing, larger group this time. Thank you all for joining us, Sharon, Jenny, Rabbi Stein. Thank you for joining us to add to the mix and add to the conversation. And I thought I would just say a moment about, just say a word about. I think some of the inspiration behind why we developed the Spark Fellowship as we did, and where it ties into this kind of broader conceptual work. In an ideal scenario, in fact, when we all started dreaming this up together, Meredith, Larry, and Brad, it was, is it possible to actually hold in tension the 30,000 foot and the ground level as we dream up what life is going to look like in a year, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? And that was before COVID hit. Right? That this was a community that was really ready to reimagine how it was going to move forward. And reimagine doesn't mean leave everything behind. Reimagine doesn't mean flip everything upside down. Reimagine simply means let's actually pause, let's reflect. Where have we been? Who are we? Who did we want to be when we first got here? Where do we want to go? right? And let's reframe where the opportunities are. That's where the hard data that Every Voice Counts provided for us gave us the opportunity to really reframe what we were experiencing. There were those in the community, and we heard this through our conversations, that it sort of felt and experienced this narrative of erosion as being really true, that the sky is falling, and it's just kind of falling really slowly, right? It's not tomorrow that it's going to crash, but the sky's falling slowly. And then there were other folks in the community, in institutions, not in institutions, who were just like, wow, the sky is the limit, actually. The sky is the limit. And so our work then was, can we hold together that intention, a narrative in which there is partial truth to the idea that there is a sky, that the sky is falling, and a narrative in which there is partial truth to the idea that the sky is the limit? And can we bring those people into the same room, and those stories in conversation with each other, and those institutions in collaboration with each other, right? That's like the challenge and the opportunity at the moment. And then once you've reflected and then reframed, that's when the reimagining work comes in. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So really, to echo what Meredith pointed out before, is that we've done so much we've introduced some real theoretical tensions in our time together here in the think tank, whether it was between, like, what does it mean to be culturally Jewish or religiously Jewish? What's the difference between diversity and inclusion, between safety and security, between myths and facts? And if we can hold those things in tension as a community, that's how we develop a shared vision, by being in conversation and opening up. And by the way, it's not always easy conversations. It really is not. It is not easy, if you feel that the sky is falling, to sit across from somebody who believes that the sky is the limit and not want to write them off as like a Pollyannish person you want nothing to do with. And if you actually feel that the sky is the limit and you're around somebody, you're like, oh gosh, this is this person again telling us about how bad everything is, and but actually bring people into sacred conversation. That's where the magic happens. So we've done that here in the think tank. We've done that in the Spark Fellowship, and that's why I'm excited about bridging these two pieces. And so with that, I want to introduce my colleague, Rabbi Julia Appel. So Rabbi Appel I've known since I was 14, and she's, like, you'll see, incredibly brilliant and really, really humble. And had I been at this, if I had been in the AP level classes, I would have copied off of her tests, but I wasn't even in those classes. She's like 10 steps ahead. And she's brought that capacity to Klal, thank goodness, and to this community here in Rochester. So I'll let Rabbi Appel tell you more about the work that she's done in kind of setting the stage for what the Spark Fellowship means. And again, just what I want you to keep in mind, what I want all of us to keep in mind as you hear some of these stories, is that change happens at 30,000, at the ground level, and everywhere in between. And so that's the ground we've tried to cover here in Spark. And that's why, you'll God willing, you will hear that. You will hear the 30,000 foot dreams, and you will hear okay, what does that mean that I should do tomorrow as well? And I think you'll hear those in relationship with each other. So with that, I will turn it over to Rabbi Appel, and I will apologize for my early exit, but rest assured, you're in good hands.
Thanks, Rabbi Babchuk.
Thank you, Ilan. Perfect.
It's so nice to see those of you that I've had conversations with already, and to meet those of you who I haven't yet. So I am Klal's Director of Innovation Training and Curriculum. And in that capacity, I'm the lead staff member on Spark Rochester, creating the curriculum and creating the opportunities for learning together. I've been coaching the teams, and especially the team leaders, of whom we have 3 on this call today. Thank you so much to Rabbi Stein, to Jenny, and to Sharon for taking the time to be able to speak with us today as well. I wanted to give us a kind of sacred frame, actually, for this work. I know that in the think tank, you have been talking a lot about different tensions and about, kind of bigger ideas. So I want to set the story of Spark Rochester, actually, within our sacred tradition. And I want to tell you about the story of Yitro and Moshe. So you may recall that Yitro is Moshe's father-in-law. And in the Torah, it talks about how after the revelation at Mount Sinai, Yitro brings Moshe's wife and sons to him, sort of reunites with them. And I want to tell you this story in the context of thinking about, sorry, my phone is making noises, thinking about what does it mean to serve your people well? And what does it look like when you realize you're not? And you need to pivot and you need to change something in order to provide them with what they really need. So that's how I'm going to tell you the story of Yitro and Moshe. So Yitro brings Moshe's wife and sons to join him, and he hears the story of the revelation. He hears the story of the Exodus. He's amazed. He actually makes a sacrifice to God. It's like this conversion moment for Yitro. And then next day, Yitro comes by and says, "Oh, let's see what my son-in-law is doing today." And Moshe is sitting with lines of people in judgment. They're like, my neighbor took this. How much does he owe me? Who's the rightful owner of this thing? Or capital cases or little things, right? And they're just going through, and Moshe is sitting there. This one, that one, this is the right answer. Lines and lines of people. And Yitro says, "Moshe, what are you doing?" He says, "They're coming to see me. I'm making judgments." He says, "What?" They're sitting around day and night. Like this is not right. He literally says, "This is not right." And Moshe says, "Well, I'm the one they're coming to see." And Yitro basically says, "Are you? Or is it actually that they need someone wise to judge their case?" And Moshe realizes they didn't need Moshe. They needed a person who was wise to judge their case. And so Moshe changes the whole situation. It's no longer the long lines. They appoint judges, and this is the beginning of our judicial system. They appoint judges in different levels, right? But it took someone else to say, like, "Are you sure that's what they need?" Because it doesn't look like it's working, right? It doesn't look like they're being well served in the mindset you're in right now. And so what Yitro teaches Moshe is actually a huge realization. Moshe didn't understand the people's needs. He designed the delivery of what he thought they needed in a way that actually was totally not what they wanted to participate in, waiting around day and night. It also, frankly, wasn't even accessible to whole groups of people who don't have the time to wait around day and night because they're farmers or because, right? Like it didn't work, but he was really trying his best. Right? He was trying his best to serve the people in what he knew how. And it took someone else saying, "Let's check on that. Let's make sure we are really hearing what the people's needs are. And let's get right with what they actually need." So that's the story that we are actually enacting in Spark Rochester. I mean, lahavdil, we are not Moshe, but in Jewish institutions, we sometimes think we know what people need and then we try to give it to them. And sometimes that means Moshe with a long line day and night because we didn't quite get it right, because we didn't quite ask the right questions. Yitro says, "Why are they doing this?" Right? Yitro starts asking questions. So we don't always get it right, but there are ways to get it more right. And that's what we're teaching in Spark Rochester, is we are teaching how do we go to our people and better understand their needs, better understand what they are hiring us to do, so to speak. What job are they giving us? Moshe thought the job the people were hiring him to do was to be Moses. And actually, they just needed someone to tell them the right answer. So we're looking at what is success? What does it mean to serve people well? Oftentimes we assume success means membership is holding steady or maybe even increasing a little. We assume it means certain numbers of people are coming to our events. But that's only one, right? That's one measure, but it may not be the most essential measure. We have to ask, are we serving our people well? Are we serving everyone who wants to be served, not just some people, not just the people who have the time to wait around all day for Moshe, right? And is there something potentially that we don't totally understand about what our people need from us that we could actually understand better by observing them, by talking to them, and by better appreciating their needs? So Spark is designed, it's an 8-month training program for Jewish professionals and lay leaders. And as Meredith explained, we have 10 teams that are based at 10 different institutions. And the purpose of the experience, and the teams are about 4 to 6 people, a mix of different functions. And they go through 4 different stages of this process. And Rabbi Stein and Jenny and Sharon can tell you more about what the experience was like in any of those. But first, we did some learning in November and December. We looked around us. We said, what are the changes happening in the sociology of faith in North America? What are the changes happening in Rochester? We looked at the Every Voice Counts study. And we also looked at what are bright spots in this? What are Jewish institutions that are thriving amidst this changing landscape? And what's making them do that? What are they acting on? What are some of the methods they're using? What are some of the ways that they're getting it a little more right, that they are serving people better than they might otherwise have? The second unit was research, and that's really the heart of what we're teaching. And our 3 team leaders can tell you a lot more about that because they just completed that unit, which is going and interviewing our people. So each team interviewed between 15 and 30 some odd congregants or members or people within their purview about their lives, about their needs, about the ways that they find community, about the ways they find joy, about the things they're worried about, to better understand who they are, what they need, and what your institution could actually give them, right? So you need a right match between your mission and your capabilities and what people are telling you that they need in their lives. And so they're going through that process. They've just finished their interviews, and what lies ahead is the 2 final units, designing and implementing something. And so the design unit we're just entering now, and that's consisting of creating a prototype they're going to actually bring back to the people they interviewed and say, like, does this fit? Does this resonate? How would you change it? And then they're going to launch something. They're going to bring something into the real world and say, okay, we can't actually do a week-long young adult camp experience, but we're going to do a bonfire for Lag BaOmer and see what happens, right? So we're going to implement something that is, gets to the heart at what we think we heard in the interviews, and then we hope we'll keep going. So that's what Spark is, bringing people through the process, how to listen, and then how to design for what people are actually experiencing in their actual lives, instead of what we sometimes do, which is sort of get a couple people in a room to brainstorm and, think of a really good idea. But when that idea is divorced from actual people, it isn't always what anybody wants. And that could look like not many people coming, or it could look like just sort of no one's excited about, the offerings of this institution. It could look like membership dropping off. It could look like people always complaining to you. It could look like a lot of things. But that's where we are, and that's the arc of the experience. And the goal is really to turn around that planning process. So it's based on the people, their actual lives, serving them well, knowing them well in order to serve them well. And through that, building a stronger, more engaged community in Rochester, and basing community programming on relationships, on listening, rather than on the ideas of a couple of people in a room. So our 10 teams are Temple Sinai, TBK, Temple Beth El, Temple Emmanuel, Jewish Family Service, Jewish Senior Life, the JCC, the Jewish Federation of Rochester, Hillel Community Day School, and the National Council of Jewish Women Rochester chapter. So I want to, maybe I'll open if anybody has a question now, but we have time for questions later. I also know that Rabbi Stein has to get to continuing to chair the CCAR conference this week. And Sharon is in the car. Thank you, Sharon, for being with us. I want to make sure she has time to speak. She's actually just in the middle of some things that came up very last minute. But I want to invite, if anybody has any questions now about Spark and its structure that I could best answer, I'm happy to take those. And there'll be time to ask our team leaders who are really in the depths of this work right now.
Julia, it's Ruben Auspitz here.
Hi.
Hi. Could you mention the synagogues again?
Yeah,
Good.
Temple Sinai,
Okay. Who else?
TBK, Beth El, Emmanuel. So there's 4 synagogues and 6 communal institutions, including what would be 2 Federation agencies, Federation itself, the Day School, JCC, and National Council of Jewish Women.
Okay, and my apologies. I'm not familiar with Emmanuel. What denomination is that?
Emmanuel is Reform, right? Rabbi Stein?
Yes, Emmanuel's Reform Synagogue. It's led by Rabbi Dror Settle. That was the other synagogue in Arundecoit, other than Beth David. And they have, at this point, taken up residence at the JCC.
Yeah, they just finished their
Right.
move. It's a very exciting time for them.
That's right. So there's a 3 Reform, 1 Conservative, no Modern Orthodox, no Orthodox.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there?
But all congregations were given the opportunity to participate?
Yeah. So we, so just to let you know how people ended up, actually, Meredith, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Thanks. That's very
Yeah.
helpful.
Mhm.
So we had we actually, this really began long before the pandemic. We brought Elon and Brad in a couple of times actually to meet with our agency leadership and synagogue leadership, just to do a little bit of work together to sort of begin to grease the wheels about the relationship that we were developing with Klal. And then formally in the fall, it was right after the holidays, I think, we pulled together a meeting for anybody who was interested. And we pretty much had representation, I think, from every agency and synagogue to talk about the Spark Fellowship and to outline what it was going to look like and entail and what it was going to be. And everybody was given the opportunity to apply and participate. Amy Liebenson, who was staffing it, did an extraordinary job of checking in with everybody, encouraging them to apply and making sure that we had a robust response. As a matter of fact, originally we thought we wouldn't have more than 8 teams, but we ended up with 10 because there was such a strong response. So everybody, every institution, synagogue, agency, big or small, had the opportunity to participate. They made the choice whether they wanted to or not, and we would have figured out how to meet the needs of whomever was willing to give the time and participate. So there was a lot of groundwork, a lot of legwork to make sure everybody had equal opportunity to be a part of the process.
Thanks, Meredith. Did the Modern Orthodox give any reason for not participating?
Honestly, I don't remember, Ruben. Let me go back and check with Amy. I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
I think it might have simply been a bandwidth issue. And, we were very clear that this was going to be a significant time commitment and organizations needed to be able to field a team and put the time in. And if I recall, I think they felt like they just didn't have the time and the bodies to do it right now.
I can relate to
I'll
it.
double check.
Thanks, Meredith.
So maybe I'll turn it over to Rabbi Stein to start, although I just want to check in with Sharon. Sharon, is there a better time in the next 15 something minutes for you to speak?
I think I should be okay.
Okay. So Rabbi Stein, I'll invite you to begin. Rabbi Stein is the team leader for TBK. And then we'll hear from Sharon and we'll hear from Jenny. And I asked them to speak about, just tell you the group they're focusing on. We went through a process of identifying, is there a constituent group that your institution isn't serving well? And we encourage them to look at, who are there a significant number of people within your circle, but you're not really devoting very much, whether it was budget, programming, staff time, or right, you're not really devoting a lot of resources to, but you could be serving better. So they'll share with you the group they're focusing on and why, what they've learned about the group, from those interviews that they've done, and also just like anything they're taking away from how to create communal offerings in this, new way of approaching it. And also a little bit, what they might imagine would be next steps for their institution or for the city. So Rabbi Stein, take it away.
Thanks so much, Rabbi Appel, and I appreciate everyone's understanding in advance that I'll be sort of squeezed at the end time. There is that expression about dancing at 2 weddings, but we can always challenge the conventional wisdom, I suppose. Just a personal note as I'm beginning, that it's been really such a pleasure personally to be able to re-engage with Klal's leadership in this moment. The year before I moved to Rochester 8 years ago, Rabbi Babchuk and I were in the Rabbis Without Borders Fellowship together. So we would ride the train from Providence to New York together. And that was such a transformational year in so many ways. and brought those insights and that perspective into my work here at the synagogue. But now to be able to deepen that and broaden that, it's really been very important. Let me tell you a little bit about what we've been doing, in particular, how the guidance of Klal has been so important. So we have a team of 5 leaders from the congregation who are our Spark team. We took very seriously the advice of Rabbi Babchuk and Rabbi Appel that these shouldn't just be the usual suspects. These shouldn't be sort of take your executive committee or take your 5, most active volunteers and just transform them into a Spark team. And one of the things that's really been nice is the team members actually didn't know each other before we began this. And it was sort of another layer of the experience, was them getting to know each other, learning about their own hopes and dreams, their own personal experiences. And it was a very, very good foundation. We ended up, after working through this process, focusing on the population in their 40s and 50s. We've sort of been alternately defining it by age, 40s and 50s, but really saying we want to look at those whose kids are past bar and bat mitzvah. So high school and beyond, young empty nesters, there are different terms that we've used sort of interchangeably. We chose this population in part because they're an underserved population within the congregation, but also because we perceived such a great spiritual need, emotional need within this population. They were anxious for support, they were anxious for relationship building, and they really were a population we felt could be transformative to the future. It's a population working with them that speaks to the relevance of synagogues and Jewish life across the city. What are the needs in their lives, not just on Shabbat and holidays, not just at bar mitzvah and wedding, but what is it that can add to the quality of their lives? So we've been asking lots of questions through the research process, through the interview process, and again, with the guidance of Klal, what can we do for them? I'm sorry, not what we can do for them, but what they can do for us. In other words, we're not just selling them on programming. We're not just saying, if we got better cookies, would you come to the Oneg or something of that nature? Really looking at what are the opportunities in their lives. And I would say a lot of it outside of regular temple life, outside of Shabbat and holidays and so on. It's really, we've tried very hard to say this is not just about building attendance for our own offerings. We certainly don't deny that we want to sustain loyalty to the congregation, but we want to sustain loyalty to Judaism in a much broader, much more general way. And that loyalty goes beyond the 4 walls of our building. In the process, again, what was set up as a framework and the guidance of the Klal leadership really was critical, that as we went through the research and the questions, that we tried to listen very hard and not simply respond. It was very easy to fall back on answering their answers. Taking a deep dive, looking back at their experiences, their Jewish journey from birth or conversion until now, and avoiding questions like, if we did X, would you come? Or can you tell us what would help you to come? Really looking at the arc of their lives and how did they get to this moment, and what could we do in the future? So really creating that process for thinking and strategizing, not just program planning, not just program evaluation. And that's really led us to this point where I think the people we interviewed are deeply invested in what comes next, as are the team members. And a piece of our next step, again, is going to be fleshing out the specifics of these relationship building activities. The last note I'll make is that the Temple Sinai team has focused on a similar population, and we've started to have some conversations about our shared goals, that we all recognize a lot of the same things. And how can this be community building across the city and across the Jewish community, and not simply sort of bumping up our attendance records? So I'll stop with that. I'm happy to answer any questions if there's something you want me to unpack a little further. And I will take the chance to say thank you to all of you for making this possible.
Thanks, Rabbi Stein. And like adding to that, we kick off each unit with a workshop where we go pretty in depth in the content, the skills, the context of that unit of learning and doing. And we had our kickoff for the design unit last week. And it was actually really sweet because I was able to pair all of the teams with another team that had something in common. So there are 2 teams looking at 40s and 50s. There's 2 teams looking at caregiving. There's 2 teams looking at parents of elementary school children, for example. And so we're just starting to have some of those cross-institutional conversations that are partially enabled by having done those interviews and being able to hear, oh, what was the same, what was different about who you spoke with. So it's really, I think, very fertile ground right now for lots of different ideas of where to go next. Thank you, Rabbi Stein. Sharon, is now a good time?
Yeah, I can speak
Okay.
now. I first want to apologize to everybody that you can't see a face, as last minute I had to be driving to pick up my daughter from school. But I'm volunteering with the JCC, a great group of people, 5 of us that are looking at analyzing the JCC, our members. We decided to focus on families with children ages 5 to 12. One thing that kind of came to our attention was that people are really excited and really like part of the J and doing a lot of things with the J when their kids are in preschool at the Woke Center. But then once their kids reach elementary school age, they might not spend as much time with us anymore. And they might have created some really good friends and family relationships at Woke. And they might continue those friendships and do things with those families outside of the JCC once their kids get a little bit older. And we're trying to figure out how we might be able to keep them within our walls at the JCC. And they might be members and be part of fitness, but are there other things that we can provide for them? They're so busy with activities, taking their kids from place to place, whether it's soccer or music lessons or whatever. We need to figure out, how we might be able to meet their needs better. We interviewed about 20 people between the 5 of us, and it was a great cross-section of current members, people that were members and might not be members anymore, some people that were non-Jewish, and we wanted to hear from them about their experiences in life at present. What is meaningful to them? What do they do outside of the JCC? How do they feel about raising their children? What's important to them? And what we heard from a lot of people was they want to take care of themselves. They needed some me time. Many of them said, I don't mean to be selfish, but, and some of this could be moment in time, what's happening with COVID. They have a lot of stresses on them at this time with young kids and having to do so many things. But it was interesting that they spoke about needing to take care of themselves so that they could take care of their kids, and needing to meet their own needs so that they could take care of their kids. Another thing we heard from them was about the importance of social connection and creating community. They really are missing being with other families and creating community connections, having conversations with people. And that's, across the spectrum. They also spoke about time management and how it's difficult to get everything done in a day, and planning, how they need to get their kids someplace, how they need to make lunch or pick up dry cleaning, or just the everyday life tasks that they have that some people found that they could do very easily and other people found that they needed help with. They also talked about the concerns about raising kids concerns about their socialization after COVID, concerns about how they can be a better parent, concerns about technology and social media and what that means for their kids. So we gleaned a lot of information from them. And what really rose to the top, I think, in all of our conversations was this issue, which I think many of the groups had this issue rise to the top, was about social connection and community. Sorry. So I think that those are the things that we found that we're going to be trying to address, that we did a lot of brainstorming in our session with the last workshop about coming up with ideas that would meet these people's needs. And we're excited to get together some more and to build prototypes. And I feel like, or we all feel like this, this methodology that we're using, we can continue to use that in the future, and we can analyze other groups of people within our organization, other demographics, to help meet their needs. Once we kind of tweak this, we can use this again. So it's been a very important tool for us to learn to use, that we can use in the future.
Thanks, Sharon, so much. And Jenny is the CEO and president of Jewish Family Service of Rochester. So tell us about your team, who you've been talking to, what you've learned, and where you might go from here.
Yes, so we identified caregivers as the group of individuals who we were targeting. We too, like Peter had said, used a group comprised of like our not usual players. Some board members who weren't necessarily actively involved before, as well as staff members whose voices we haven't heard necessarily before. We really have been focusing on caregivers in a broad spectrum. Caregivers of children with disabilities, caregivers of aging parents, caregivers of a spouse who might be ill, you name it, the broad range of caregivers. Really what we've learned a lot in this process. What an incredible process it's been. And to Sharon's point, I have no doubt that we'll utilize this process in the future. And I think first and foremost, what we've learned is the importance of the voice of the people that we serve, and not just coming up with programs without really, really hearing and taking into account the voices, the perceptions, the ideas. Interestingly, looking at caregivers, in one of the primary findings, I would say, that has come about has to do with the loneliness of the experience of caregiving. And one of the things that I find so fascinating with this whole process is we've interviewed over 30 people, the vast majority who have written or called to provide us with thank you notes or thank you messages for taking the time to talk to them. To me, certainly indicative, even more so, of the loneliness factor of the caregiving experience. The notion that our interview alone was that powerful to them, that someone took the time to ask the questions and listen, to me, speaks volumes. And I think that that's just happens to be that we looked at caregivers and loneliness happens to be this theme, but I do think it's worth noting that what we certainly, aside from all these exciting ideas we have with regards to prototypes, what we really recognize is this loneliness piece that we absolutely, whether that's our prototype or not in some capacity, that loneliness piece will be addressed by us for sure. And it's not to be underestimated. What we've recognized also, aside from the loneliness piece, is the overwhelming nature of caregiving. The need for respite care is tremendous. Also, what we recognize, as much as people begged and pleaded in some sense in terms of feeling the need for respite care, there was just as many who said, I need it, but it'll never be okay because it's not going to be myself providing the care. So this sort of ownership of care and the caregiving experience and the need for some sort of respite support and like trying to figure out what does that balance look like, because so many caregivers are primary caregivers and they recognize that without their care, they don't feel comfortable, or the person they're caring for won't feel comfortable necessarily accepting help from someone else. So it's an interesting dichotomy and something to certainly think about. Navigating resources, whether that's interpreting medical appointments or figuring out how best to advocate for your child with a disability in amidst a complicated landscape there. Finances for aging parents and trying to take care, whether it's from out of state and caring for aging parents here in Rochester. A lot of logistics that are super complicated, and the commonality is that logistics are hard, but so individual to the circumstance, and recognizing how heterogeneous the population is when we're talking about caregiving and the different types of caregiving. With regards, so lots of findings, and we have lots of ideas with regards to what this prototype might look like. I'm thrilled at the prospect that this next part after the prototype, that after we figure out what we do, is that we get to call back these caregivers and say to them, what do you think? Because it gives us another opportunity for connection for them, which I really believe wholeheartedly they'll welcome. And then in terms of the future, I think to my point, what I said earlier is that I know that we'll utilize this process in the future. But I think more importantly, when we're thinking about the future of Jewish Rochester, I think if I was going to take something away from this, in our last team meetings where we were meeting, and Julia, you paired us with some other agencies, and we're starting to have some cross-agency conversations, which I think is really exciting. And I think the most important piece is that ideally we can build upon that, and that these agencies can really start working across agencies even more so in thinking of the future of Jewish Rochester, and most importantly, taking into account the voices of those who are not in the design part of that process, but those people that we're going to be trying to imagine for, that we won't imagine for them, we'll imagine with them and utilize their voices in this process. And then I feel like whatever comes will be what's right. But without those voices, which is, Claw's message all alone, without those voices, it's not gonna, the buy-in's not gonna be there, and I don't think the effectiveness either. And I can't thank you enough for this opportunity, because our team, I can speak for and just say that we've gotten a lot out of it, and I'm excited, so thank you.
Thanks so much, Jenny. I want to open it up to questions. I thought of a couple questions to get the conversation going, but I think I'll turn it over to you all. What are your questions? We have two team leaders here. I'm happy to answer questions. Rabbi Hirschfeld can certainly add, the broader context and perspective. But yeah, any questions you have?
Can I add one quick piece too?
Mm-hmm.
So since we have 10 teams and every team has done at least 20 to 30, if not more, interviews, we have this whole other data set in addition to Every Voice Counts, which is so interesting. So in our last session, which was, I guess it was last Thursday or the Thursday before, but whenever, it was last week. We got to hear for the first time, we've sort of been doing our work independently, but we got to start to hear from all the other teams about all of the data. And when you start coupling the data from Every Voice Counts with all of these personal interviews, and they were significant interviews. These were not 5-minute conversations. These were 20, 30, 40-minute conversations. And
some of them were an hour and a half, depending on how long people were really into it. Some of them ended up making best friends on there,
No, it's absolutely true. And we, the Federation too, we had, a significant number of interviews. People really, really, really opened up in ways that even I was surprised that everybody was so open and honest about their thoughts and feelings and what they think and what they want. And to Jenny's point, they were so happy to be asked. So we now have these two incredible data sets between all of these very personal interviews and Every Voice Counts, that it gives us such great opportunity to continue to think together, work together in creating whatever will be. So I just wanted to add that to the mix.
Yeah.
I guess either for Jenny or Sharon, I do have a question, and even Julie on behalf of the Federation team. I guess the question I had, from the calls that we've had with CLAL or the interviews is sort of what have been the surprises that have come up through this process?
That was one of the questions I wrote down to ask too. I'm glad you
That was-
asked it.
Sorry, great minds, Julia.
No, sorry. I was letting other people. Yeah, because I've heard a lot of those insights come up in our meetings of like, oh, we did not know this was a thing. Yeah, Julie.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I don't know if this is sort of the most insightful surprise, but I actually was stunned that people took the call, to be honest. I mean, I was emailing total
Wow.
strangers, people that I didn't know them. I just had their name off of a list. I sent them an email and all of them wrote me back. All of them took time out of their days to schedule the meetings, which I thought was really incredible. And, I was asking for 45 minutes. So that was a lot. And then I totally agree with what Jenny and Meredith said. These people, the people that I spoke to were unbelievably appreciative. And I think having them put in words sort of the answers to our questions, I felt like sort of gave me a lot of insight into the value of Federation, because they were willing to talk to us, that they had actually thought about the community and the way it was organized and how they'd fit in. I just thought it was tremendously valuable.
In our team leader meeting earlier today, Jenny and Sharon can attest, another team leader said, one of the best things about the interviews is that people got to tell us the things they really liked. Because
Right.
sometimes the calls you get are complaints, which is also good information. But it gave her a bigger perspective on like, oh, there's some stuff we're actually really doing right. And I love that, Julie. I think you're both right. I mean, that when people feel like you are really going to take seriously what they're telling you and that they could contribute to something, they take the call. And I remember, I think toward the beginning, when I was like rolling out the research unit and people were like, well, like, who says they're going to talk to me? And I was in a couple of different team meetings of, well, I mean, we're going to have to come up with a much bigger list. Right. And I feel awkward about asking them for their time. And I said, okay, I only know this because I've done it. Right. That people actually appreciate it. They actually appreciate being able to tell you something about their lives. And yeah, I love that you've outlined, that's an insight in and of itself.
Right.
We're not imposing, we're actually giving them an opportunity.
I have a question for you. It's Ruben here. When the calls are placed, is it clear that it is a survey call and part of the Sparks program or a needs analysis program, as opposed to where a donor might be involved, the donor being concerned that it might be a call for a solicitation? Is there disclosure up front?
Yeah, Jenny, you want to speak to that? How we framed our asks?
Yeah, so we sent our asks at JFS came in the form of an email where we explained that we were part of this innovative process and collaboration with CLAL, and explained a little bit about CLAL, and then saying that you've been identified as a caregiver and we really want to just pick your brain and have a conversation about some of how you feel like your needs have best been met or not met in this type of role type. And just so we did a little bit of explaining about CLAL and a little bit of explaining about what our goals were from having the conversation. So it was very clear that it was just a conversation and not any sort of ask at all.
And we worked on language around it too.
Yeah.
I think I sent like a sample language, everybody
did.
personalized it, but just to make really clear, we are neither asking for a donation nor are we recruiting you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Julie,
JCC.
you put something in the chat. Oh, Sharon, yes.
Yeah, the JCC did the same thing. I mean, we sent out an email initially saying that we wanted to get their input on you know, the JCC and have a conversation with them and learn more about who they are, and that we were trying to meet the needs of the population. And we mentioned nothing about that it was going to be, you know, a fundraising call or anything like that. We talked about Cloud, we talked about Spark, and the opportunity that the community on the whole is having through working with Spark and what the Federation has sponsored and CONAR. And I think people were really, like everybody has said in the past, people just wanted to speak. So many people just wanted to just share. And when you talk to them about themselves, they were just like ready to just kind of go off. And some conversations lasted maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. I had a conversation that lasted maybe an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. So people were really thankful.
Yeah.
So
You know-
I have a question, and I want to thank Meredith because she took care of my first question, which was a surprise, and that Julia was thinking the same thing does tell you there actually is a coherence to this and an underlying method. But I also want to thank Julie because in answering, you led to my second question, which is, what did you discover about, and I would ask this of Sharon and Jenny primarily, and Julie, you can add to it. What did you discover about yourselves and the premises that you bring to the work you do, right? So Julie, my summary of your experiences, you discovered that the Federation has more social capital in the community than you imagined. Because in sociologic terms, the readiness to take that call was you drawing upon a well of social capital that ran deeper than you imagined. Right? And so you discovered something pretty profound about your own premises. Forget about the people you were talking with. Wow, I didn't realize how much social capital we had. And so there was a moment of self-discovery there that of course then affects everything. And so I would like to hear more about that, but I'd also like to ask Jenny and Sharon, what did you discover about not yourselves, this isn't a therapy session, but the premises that you bring to the work that you do?
Just for the record, I love the therapy session coming from JFS. Just people joke that
Feel free to take it any direction you want. How's that for a therapy?
I mean, any amount of therapy I could get during a pandemic is welcome.
We can talk feelings all day long. I love it. I'd say well, one thing that I think that's interesting that we noticed is that a lot of our assumptions going in were actually correct. A lot of our assumptions about what we thought caregivers were going to tell us that they needed and wanted were, and that does, by no means do I think that means that we should have gone and done that without hearing their voices, because I think their voices more than anything is what's going to drive us to actually do and implement in really effective ways. But I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that we were all at the beginning so sure that everything we were hypothesizing was actually not going to be correct, and there was really a lot of what we predicted would emerge did, and so I liked that. That would be a positive, but surprise nonetheless. What else would I say that we've really discovered? I think the other thing that I've really discovered that's surprising, in particular because most of these people that we've interviewed in some level have a connection or have had a connection to JFS, is still has to do with the misperception of understanding our agency. And there still remains such confusion about either what a social service agency is or what JFS is or does, or sort of how that all fits within the Jewish community. So that's surprising considering who we were targeting to ask.
Great, thank you.
Can I add
I want to note something. Oh,
can I add two things quickly? One is that, and this wasn't a surprise, but sort of that we learned along the way, was that people really do think about their relationship with the Jewish community much more so than I ever thought would be the case. That these are things that people had actually given thought to, and these were, it wasn't as if we connected with people who were deeply engaged already. It was across the spectrum. people do really take the time to think about their Jewish connections communally, which I found really interesting. And the other is, which was very gratifying, was that they think about their connection in terms of community in totality and not necessarily always in particular to institutions. So as we talk about this work, it's much more about how they feel in connecting to a whole rather than particular places. And that was, I think those are things that we maybe did or didn't assume. I think we sometimes think that people think about their relationship with particular institutions, but from the vast majority of people with whom we spoke, it was so much broader than that. And it was really interesting to hear that perspective.
So Meredith, you just perfect, because I was thinking the themes that came up that I've written down just from these three are so universal about social connection and isolation and community. So how, and maybe Julia, this is in the next phases, how do we address these needs Jewishly versus just universally as needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key part that we've returned to again and again is that these are Jewish institutions. And when we were deciding how to respond to what we heard, I've really encouraged everyone to not only listen hard and identify the themes that are coming out, but when they're selecting one to be active on, select one that they are equipped, prepared, skilled, and mission aligned to address. And that we actually are not going to address every single thing we hear, but we are going to look for the match between a need we are hearing very strongly and somewhat universally, right? When when 75% of the people we talk to say basically the same thing on this theme, we know that it's a real thing. It's not just a couple people, it's something that's widespread. But we're looking for a match between the needs we're hearing and our capacity in our institution that is hearing those needs. We may not become a childcare institute. We may not open a daycare just because we're hearing people need daycares, but we may do something around, the needs that underlie that being one manifestation of addressing the need, right? So that's what makes it a Jewish response. That's what makes it specific to the institution, is that you have to actually ask the question, okay, and what are we prepared to and skilled at and excited to be able to work on? What's our part in this?
I think there's one other piece too, which has been so interesting from our team. Sorry, Julie. You may be saying the exact same thing that I'm going to say, is that what we've learned is that these are not necessarily Jewish things that people have to do together. They want to be together and do things together because they're people with whom they have something in common and there's a common thread, but it's not necessarily, a quote unquote Jewish thing. It could be hiking. It could be, travel, it could be all sorts of things that aren't considered traditional Jewish activities, but it's the group of people with whom they're doing them that matters.
That was exactly what I was going to say, Meredith.
Julie and I have been working together for a while.
I think also one thing to note that I try to convey in any of these trainings is we're not waiters. We're not taking an order and then delivering it. So, and that's actually, I don't know, Jenny and Julie and Meredith, like how you feel about when you started the interviews. It's sometimes confusing, like, so are we just going to do what they ask for? Like, I don't understand why we're doing this. We're not going to build a pool in the back of the synagogue. We're not going to, right? Like what? And it's not that we are waiters taking an order and we're going to deliver that order. It's that we are understanding the underlying conditions of their lives, the things that are hard for them. And we're saying, do we have a role to play in that? And translating that into something we can offer that might really resonate, that might really be vibrant, that might really feel supportive, that might really feel like we're serving them well. And that's like a bit of it's a little counterintuitive because we're frankly, often if we're asking people, we're like sending a survey saying, do you want, a Purim party this way or this way? often the questions we ask them are what I like to call chicken or fish questions, like, which one would you like? I will bring it to you. And that's not what we're doing here. We're asking, what are the things that underlie your decision making? What are the constrictions of your life? Where do you feel, most alive? And then we say, can we be part of that? And we try to figure out how.
I have a caveat to that though, which is that I feel like because we've asked them, I want to make sure that we can deliver. And Meredith and I've discussed this vis-a-vis Every Voice Counts. We specifically asked Jews of color about their experiences, and one of the things that I want to make sure that we do is address, because we've asked, I want to make sure that we can somehow try to address it. And I feel that way about this too. Now we've had this group of people that have given us our input, and I want to make sure that whatever it is we decide to be our prototype and deliver, I just want to make sure that we try to meet the needs that they've given us.
And what an amazing accountability to have created for yourself, right? Like, I mean, those of us serving the Jewish community, we always feel accountable. We're always like trying our best. But because we focused on groups that we know we're not quite serving as well as we might, now we actually have to do it. And what a great push in that direction. And it's a push that's not from a strategic plan. And it's a push that's not from reading an article. It's a push from like, I talked to 10 people and they want to know what I'm doing in response. That's the best kind of push.
Right. I think this is really important. I do want to jump in. There is a vast difference, and it comes back to Megan, what you were asking about. There's a vast difference between market research and genuine customer discovery. Market research assumes we have the product, it's fixed. Now we just got to push it and sell it and push it and sell it. Real customer discovery, and Megan's going to smile because I've used this in stuff in the work, is about the construction of a Venn diagram. I want to discover more about you. In the process, I will, if I'm doing it right, discover more about me or us or the institution that I work with. And I want to see, where is that overlapping shaded area? Because it's authentically what you want and need, and it's authentically what I can offer. And I think that allows everyone to have integrity in the process. So when Julia says, we're not just waiters, you have to imagine everything that's best about a totally responsive waiter, and everything, to torture the cooking metaphor, about a really impassioned chef who's like, no, I'm going to tell you what you should have at this meal because I actually know what I want to serve. And you need to have both of those consciousnesses. And that's why the questions that got answered were so important, because if I was going to summarize Meredith and Jenny and Julie, what I heard is, wow, we now know that our capacity is based on the fact that we have more social capital than we imagined, Julie's insight. That people think more deeply about these things than we often imagine, Meredith's insight. And Jenny's comment that actually we're more right than we often give ourselves credit for. Forget what you learned about all of them. Think about how the work is different if we really believe we know more than we think, they know more than we think, and they care more than we think. To me, I don't know exactly what's going to fall into that Venn diagram. That's a game changer. How could it not be? You never look at them the same way. You never look at yourself the same way. In my experience, only good things can come from that. I can't always know what they're going to be, but only good things come from that.
I want to note that I asked Jenny for, oops, dropped my ear pod. I want to know I asked Jenny for her time until 2. And so to like believe, Jenny, I'm sure you have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, you guys. It was good to see you guys. Thank you.
Jenny.
Bye.
We usually end with
Bye.
everybody at 2, so I'm sure that we know.
Okay.
Not to worry.
Wait, I gotta pick up my ear. They're new. I don't know how to keep them in my ears. I will have to run in a couple minutes too, but I just, Meredith, maybe I'll turn it back to you or yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say with your earpods, I don't know if you have a spouse that snores, but they're really great for at night if you need to block out. Not that I've ever done that. But
I literally just wear earplugs every night.
they work better than earplugs.
A little insight into my life.
Anyway, we digress. Like where we started, we are going to continue to get more into the brass tacks together, hearing more of the insights from all of our Spark teams. And if you can imagine, these were 3 of our teams. We have 7 others who've all taken different twists and turns, and it's so very interesting. And this will all converge with an opportunity to tackle together how we take the information, the projects that come out of the work that we're doing, and the learning, the gleaning from them, and figure out how to move forward together. And it's exciting. We're sort of turning a corner from the theoretical to the practical that I think we will enjoy exploring together. And like I said, we don't know where this is going to take us, but we have the right people both in the community and around this table to address it together. So thank you, Julie.
I just wanted to mention that I thought that the last meeting was fantastic. I mean, we've been working with our heads down in our own team, and we've already engaged people that aren't sort of our traditional suspects on our team. But then to have the group meeting and see what everyone else was doing and collaborate with teams that are working on sort of similar groups, it just was phenomenal. I found the process to be very educational. I just want to thank you for guiding us through it, and for Konar and all of you for supporting us through it, because it's been great.
Everybody agrees, by the way, when we have these meetings, they go from 10 in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I, for one, when I first heard that we were going to be on Zoom for 3 hours, I thought, really, I just couldn't imagine. It is the fastest 3 hours on Zoom, and everybody loves the calls. And it's not an easy feat keeping people entertained for 3 hours on Zoom. So kudos to Klal for just the great work.
Is it my tap dancing? It's the tap dancing, right?
And the singing for sure. But it's
I think it's been about focusing on this being working, right? That our time together is working together, and really, we're designing this not to put on a show, but really to enable people to do the hard work and get down, get dirty in all of it. And I think that's what, and I'm so glad to hear that, first of all, Meredith. And also that, that's been my focus all along, is really making sure this is serving you all, trying to practice what we preach. And, as Meredith and Julie can attest, we've shifted, at numerous points along the way due to team leader feedback, due to, right, for example, we reduced the amount of reading that we were putting on there, because we were like, we're just trying to get through a pandemic and we're just trying to get by. And so we said, forget it. Okay, we'll streamline this, or, expanding certain parts of the curriculum, contracting certain other parts. So, we try to practice what we preach as well.
If anybody can herd cats, it's been Amy Liebenson and Julia Appel. I mean, because there's been a lot of cat herding along the way. It's actually happened. So.
I won't say any more about that.
But I think, you heard the sentiments of Peter Stein from TVK, and Sharon Gray from JCC, and Jenny from JFS. There's just a little microcosm of the appreciation that our institutions have felt in participating in this process. They all feel that way, and they all feel like they've been given a tremendous opportunity that we will capitalize on as a community. And it's just extraordinary. So thank you. Thank you all. That's all we got. I guess we're back on in April. And at some point, I think we're going to reconvene and have a JCC meeting at some point. So stay tuned. I'll share that info as it comes up. And for those who are celebrating Passover a week from Saturday, which has sort of crept up on us, have a wonderful, happy Passover.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Stay safe.
Stay
Happy
well.
Passover.